Dr. Campbell.
Present.
Dr. Paul Hamus.
Here.
Mr. Gould. Mr. Hubbard.
Here.
Ms. Jones.
Here.
Mrs. Hall.
Here.
Ms. Hughes.
Here. Next, we'll have approval of the agenda.
Madam Chair, I move we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Hall and seconded by Dr. Campbell that we approve the agenda as presented. Please call the roll.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Dr. Campbell.
Yes.
Dr. Paul Hamus.
Yes.
Mr. Hubbard.
Yes.
Mrs. Hall.
Yes.
Ms. Hughes.
Yes. Next, you'll stand for the invocation and pledge of allegiance. Let's pray. Dear Lord, we thank you for the pleasure and the privilege of being able to come here. God, we ask that you would be with us right now. God, we ask that you would just teach us and what it is that you would have us to do, to guide our minds and our hearts and the right things to do for the children of Danville Public Schools and all of those who touch them on a daily basis. Allow us to come together as a community for what's best for our children. This we ask in your name. Amen.
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 Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we have approval of minutes. We have minutes from November 13th regular meeting and November 13th work session.
Madam Chair, I move we approve.
Second. It's been moved by Dr. Campbell, seconded by Ms. Jones, to approve both these sets of minutes as presented. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Dr. Paul Hamus.
Yes.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Mr. Hubbard.
Yes.
Dr. Campbell.
Yes.
Mrs. Hall.
Yes.
Ms. Hughes.
Yes. Next, we have a recognition of Galileo High School track team. Ms. Ring.
Good evening.
Good evening.
The Galileo cross-country teams entered the 2017 season with high expectations. Having only won one meet in program history, the Falcons leaned upon reigning state runner-up Henry Stevens to lead them to new heights. The Falcon boys team won their first meet, the Greater Danville Jamboree, and instantly gained confidence towards the goal of reaching the podium at the state championships in November. At the state championship, the boys followed up their 5th place finish from a year ago to finish 3rd overall this year, establishing Galileo as a perennial power in 1A cross country. The boys finished the regular season with a record of 51 wins and 7 losses. Along the way, Galileo won 5 of their 9 meets, highlighted by wins at the Greater Danville Metro Championship, Dogwood District Championship, and Region 1B Championships. The Galileo boys hauled in 7 individual medals at the Metro Championship, 6 medals at the Dogwood District Championship, 3 medals at the Regional Championship, and 2 medals at the State Championship. The excitement around the cross-country program may have been centered on the boys' team and all of their success, but lurking in the shadows was the Galileo's girls' team. This year, the girls' team consisted of 6 girls, all of whom were first-year runners. Looking ahead for the first time, the girls' team has the proper foundation, work ethic, attitude, and potential to begin moving up the state leaderboard themselves. We have had such a great season, and we look forward to an exciting future, and we are very, very proud of our Falcons. I would also like to add that our school-wide theme for this year is Let's Go the Distance, and they have truly gone the distance this year. So we'd like to recognize our Galileo cross-country boys and girls team. You guys will come on up here. In addition, I'd like to recognize our coaches. Dr. Johnson will come up for a picture.
Well, actually, we have to have the coaches.
And coaches, yeah.
I insist.
And then we have the 3 coaches. We have Nancy Schulmer, Mark Bryant, and Vaughn Popney.
Bravo.
I'm sure that the coaches could expand upon the excitement, so at this time, do the coaches have anything to add?
Sure. Open mic night, right? I just want to thank you guys for supporting us as a team. And while we're still young in our years of experience, we seem to be finding our way, and it's the support of you guys. We really appreciate that. I want to thank the parents. As you can see, we have a tremendous group of parents who've risen up, children with great work ethics, with great attitudes. And this group of children, no matter how well they did, I can look them in the eyes and say, I think you can do better, with a serious face. And instead of getting all depressed and angered about it, they would find ways to work harder. And it's just a testament on the parents. And the coaching staff we have here and the support of Miss Ramsey here has just been tremendous this year. She's gone the extra lengths and the extra mile, going the distance before us to make sure that things are just peaches and cream, as they say. But Nancy Schomer and Vaughn Popney is just been a tremendous asset to Galileo. And we couldn't do what we do at Galileo without them. And this is, we are the yin and the yangs. We really balance each other out well, and I'm just very thankful for them.
I always stand behind Mark, and I can never actually follow up any better than he does. He's the man of the word, so I second everything. But once again, we're thankful for you guys. We're thankful for the support of our parents, all of our students, and all of our staff that we have. So we look forward to attacking it next season, and we're really excited for what we have in store for us. Thank you for having us.
Can I ask a
tonight.
question? How many seniors do you have?
We have 5 seniors.
Could they stand?
Seniors?
Seniors.
Our seniors are
Thank you.
and so while we have our 5 seniors, and I'll speak a little bit with the boys, we have some athletes that are coming up filling those shoes. That's, we really train to make sure that we're filling those shoes of those seniors. So, our boys team, while we're losing 5 seniors that are going to be missed, we're really thankful for our friends that are our younger runners that are going to. Sure.
Would it be fair to say that someone might have gotten here a little bit late, and do you think she would be terribly embarrassed if we asked her to stand up and wave?
Where is that?
She's up front.
One of
Oh,
our
this show.
this is one of our girl runners, one of our first-year runners.
Thank you. All right, that's it.
And a couple of runners that did excel at the state meet. The team was very pleased with the 3rd place finish. But if Henry Stevens will stand, Henry Stevens has had quite a decorated career, and because of him, we've had to start a Galileo Sports Hall of Fame. So they've inducted him as the first member and only member at the present time. But Henry Stevens has countless medals, and he has been a visionary for the program himself and made us better as coaches, made us strive to be better. And his leadership has brought forward a sophomore, Owen Wood. If Owen will stand. This is the guy who's hoping to fill a spot next year, who also medaled state meet, finished 11th, I believe it was. And he leads our currently 5th ranked boys team into the state next year, upon who's returning.
Yay.
Thank you.
I want to add one more thing. The coaches have done a phenomenal job, along with the parents, the support that's there. But the coaches, I mean, they practice day in and day out. I see them running by my window every day, every day. And it's not just the students running, it's the coaches running with them. And I even traveled up to Great Meadows to see them at the state championship. And I'm going to tell you, the coaches probably ran, sorry students, but the coaches probably ran more than the students did that day, because they're all throughout the course, spread along the way to cheer the students on. And so I'm just so thankful for the coaches that were the support of the team. So thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we've come to the time in the meeting where the public may address the board. And it appears that no one has signed up ahead of time to address the board about anything. Is there anyone who has a burning desire to speak to the board about anything at this very moment? All right then. I think that will close public comments. Thank you very much.
Happy holidays.
Next, we've come to the part that so many of us are so anxious to hear about. It's the update on the facilities assessments. Dr. Osborne and Mr. Ben Motley.
Thank you, thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
Tonight we are continuing our progression with assessment information about our facilities. Tonight, Ben Motley and Nick Duncan from RRUM are here to give more information and do comprehensive feasibility studies on 4 schools: George Washington High School, Langston, Woodberry Hills Elementary, and Johnson Elementary. Mr. Motley, Mr. Duncan.
Let's see, who will flip the presentation? Well, good evening. It is a pleasure to be with you. I'm Ben Motley, Senior Partner and Architect with RRUM Architects. It's hard to believe it'll soon be 4 years that we've been with you on this journey. It's amazing how fast time goes. This is also, as Dr. Osborne mentioned, behind me, Nick Duncan, one of our staff architects, and we're going to hit the ground running here on this presentation. Our agenda today is we're going to talk first about the purpose of this presentation. We're going to give you a brief history of the CIP work that we've done to date. We're going to right off the bat, early in the presentation, hit the cost summary. I know everyone is always eager to see the numbers. And so I always figure it affects the whole way you view the entire rest of the presentation, so we like to get that out there early. We're going to talk about the parameters of the study, and that's a real important discussion. What are the assumptions? What are the criteria that we're doing in terms of these project improvements? And then spend most of the time on actually reviewing the proposed design concept for each school. And then finally, we'll talk about the impact of escalation in time. And we'll talk about some preliminary cost figures tonight, but then looking at the impact of the cost is depending on when you actually decide to implement those things. So that's the summary there. So the purpose of this presentation is really to receive input on our initial findings, these initial recommendations and design concepts. it doesn't make any sense to do a feasibility study for a project or multiple projects where we go off and do the work and then just show up at the end of the process and do a final presentation. As soon as we have some initial idea about the design concepts, about the scope of work and the cost, it's important to get that out on the table. And so that you can respond and say, well, wait a minute, we need to also look at this, or we shouldn't even consider that. So it really is preliminary. But we have a substantial amount of information to provide nonetheless. As Dr. Osborne mentioned, the school staff had asked us to focus on these 4 projects as a priority as the next step for Danville Public Schools: Johnson, Woodberry, Langston, and George Washington. So a little bit of a reminder of the work that's been done to date to kind of get this in context. We did conditions assessments of all of your schools, and another consultant actually did Langston, but essentially most of your schools back in 2014. And then in 2016, we moved from just doing a conditions assessment, and we actually started looking at testing each of the schools with design, some initial programming and some design concepts. And if you remember, we actually looked at a traditional grade structure, particularly for K through 8, keeping the traditional structure. And then last January, we had talked about actually a restructuring of the K-8. And if you recall as well, we looked at the design concepts and the cost, and essentially they were very comparable. In terms of margin of error, we said, look, there's really no cost difference between those two approaches. They were both feasible and comparable. We also had looked, if you recall, at Langston, and we had looked at it for a variety of purposes, but Langston, we said, actually made a very good fit for the Galileo Magnet High School program. It essentially filled most of that facility, and so that was a good fit. We also determined that it was not a good fit to consider things like moving school board offices to Langston. Remember, that was one of the things that has been tossed around over the years. So, you know, that actually was, in our view, that's good to actually have some determination on some of those things. You've got so many facilities and so many options, you need to start to find a way of narrowing these things. So that's why you first look at these things at kind of a high altitude, and then you start to narrow what's going to be done. And so this tonight is more of that narrowing. Now it's really focusing with more detail on 4 projects. And then as far as George Washington High School had been, up to this point, or prior to what we presented tonight, we had done only some initial space studies and programming and so forth. Really kind of enough to be confident about where the precision machining should go. And you know, and then obviously the precision machining program was done. So that was a good exercise. You do enough to make sure that you're planning well for the future. So that's kind of the history. And now we get to this point of these 4 schools. Now, also as a brief reminder, we had talked about this over the years. You know, what is it that generates the need for capital improvement? So as a simple reminder, there's usually poor conditions, there's functionality problems, and there's programmatic changes. Over time, your needs actually change. So now we're going to consider what we're calling a comprehensive feasibility study for these 4 projects. We're trying to address all of these issues. Coming up with a program, addressing the functional problems, and addressing the poor conditions. Now, this is the heart attack sheet. This is preliminary data of what we're going to call vital statistics for the schools. And if you look at everybody wants to go right to the bottom line. The bottom right-hand corner says for these 4 projects, based on the assumptions that we have made, and we're going to review with you carefully, we're looking at a total project cost, if you were to design these over the next year and bid them about a year from now, at about $119 million. Now, this is an order of magnitude number. Those numbers will be refined. They'll be refined as we get into more detail. They'll be refined as you say yes or no to different scopes of work or maybe you like certain ideas and don't like others. But nonetheless, you need to know fairly early in the game, in our opinion, what ballpark are we in? I mean, is this a $40 million? Is it $80 million? Well, we're saying ballpark is essentially $120 million project that we're talking about with these 4 schools. Now, okay, so that's that bottom line. Let's back up a little bit and look at this chart a little more carefully, because it's important to understand some of the vital statistics here. So Johnson, you have an current enrollment, and of course it changes all the time through the year, but of about 600. And so the programmatic basis for this school is 600 now and 600 in the future. In other words, we're not really, that's kind of the target and intending to be the target. And so let's look at kind of this data for one school at a time. The year that this school was built was in 1952. Now that's important to realize for all of these schools. We're 60 plus years on these facilities. That's a lot of time. And while the physical structural aspects of a school or most any building, if properly cared for, can be almost indefinite. That's why you still have castles in Europe that are occupied and are thousands or hundreds of years old. There are certain components of any facility that just wear out over time. And some of them are seen and some of them are unseen. So the ones that wear out usually first are the heating and cooling systems. They need about every 20 to 25 years, they need to be replaced or significantly refurbished. That's why the last major renovation, or any renovation of substance, at Johnson was a heating and cooling system renovation in 2004. That doesn't mean that other things haven't been done, but we're talking about the material ones. Why is that important? Because that was 2004, and that may not seem that long ago, but by the time this project may get built, we're approaching the time that it's time to actually look at those heating and cooling systems again. You're already in the life of those systems, so that if you were to undertake a major renovation, you would not want to leave those systems in place. And why is that important? Because heating and cooling systems in a building are mostly above ceiling. And so once you're kind of getting above the ceiling, that means you're impacting the lighting systems. And you also then have the opportunity to deal with other things to modernize a school, like adding fire suppression systems and things of that nature. So, and if actually you look at all 4 of these schools, they have the same story. They're about the same age. Their last significant renovation was at about that time. And so they're all going to be ready by the time you do projects to do a significant refurbishment. The other data that we have is, trying to get that mouse to, whoops. I need to back up with this.
The second
Previous, there we go. Apologize for that. I think the mouse doesn't like this glass surface. Anybody have a notepad or something?
Yeah.
Or a piece of paper? Thank you, I apologize. That might be a little better. Okay, so I'm actually going to grab my laser pointer. I think that's going to work a little better. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so the other data we have is this is your existing building size, and this is the size of the proposed addition. And then there's the individual school cost. So you see in Johnson we're talking about an order of magnitude of $19 million. But the reason it's important to look at there, you'll see in each school how much addition is really needed to satisfy the program. So in this case over at Johnson, there's quite a bit of that square footage, probably about 40% is new. So now we can go more quickly through the others. Woodberry, you have about just shy of 400 students now, and we're planning for 470. You can see the age and the renovation issues were the same. And the amount of the addition that's needed there is similar in proportion to that of Woodberry Hills. But it is a smaller project overall, and it has this preliminary price tag of $15 million. Langston has about, or Galileo, we should say, has about 275 currently. Approximately, that we're targeting 300. You could see again the year it was built, when the last major renovations were done. It's a pretty sizable campus, 109,000 square feet. And so you can see the amount of the proposed addition here is actually really small. It's just mainly a matter of renovations. And you know, I think it's a pretty neat campus. Those buildings, the era of those buildings, the architectural character of those buildings, I think are pretty neat. That's just an opinion. And we're looking at 19 million there. And then finally, GW, and this is the one that is probably going to, as it naturally would, it's the largest school. High schools have the most complex programming. So there's probably a lot of discussion that's going to need to occur about the scope of work and the design concepts for GW. But right now, there's about 1,350 kids, essentially planning for 1,500, and with the idea that ultimately the enrollment might be 1,800. And the way you accomplish that difference is just by adding some additional classrooms. All of the core facilities and so forth that are in the 1,500, like the gymnasiums and the cafeterias and the administrative areas and so forth, will, in our opinion, support that larger number. But right now, we're suggesting building for the any expansions for the 1,500. Now, GW is really large, 318,000 square feet, very spread out campus, but we're looking at a fair amount of additions that really are a lot associated with the new gymnasium and associated with getting all the circulation patterns working better in that facility, and some CTE additions as well, but we're going to go through that. So that's the breakdown of the data. And maybe, because I know we're being asked to try to keep this to like a 30-minute time frame, but at some point we could go through this data much more carefully, but it's important, in our opinion, it's important that the board kind of verify whether some of this base data is the correct direction. And by the way, in terms of doing a comprehensive feasibility study for any project, it would not be uncommon that we would have a special meeting, a work session, just to go over a project. We could do that for each of these schools. It really could, in terms of the complexity that would need to be reviewed. All right. What's next? What are the parameters? What are the assumptions about these buildings? Well, for one, we have taken the approach, really at the direction of Dr. Jones' staff, to say, as we look at this, let's first approach it that we're going to do it right. Right? We're not going to Band-Aid it and just fix what we just the absolute minimum, but we're going to first look at how do you do it right. You can always back off of that, right? But it's important to know, it's generally, school systems want to know what's the price tag if we're going to do it to proper standards. Now that does not mean that we're being extravagant or fixing every single little problem like it's a new school, but it's trying to substantially address the issues so that you have a facility that is competitive in this education environment. And that means, in this case, and again, you can go back and decide where you might cut back on some things, but this means new heating, ventilation, and air conditioning and plumbing systems, primarily. Fully renovated lighting, power, and data systems. I mean, these are really important functions in any facility. Mostly, not completely, but mostly renovated finishes. Ceilings and painted walls and new floor coverings where needed. But not where they're not needed. You've got terrazzo floors, for example, in lots of places, and those are just excellent finishes. There's no need to do those. And this is a fairly big one. Site infrastructure improvements. These are the issues that as the buildings get to this age, they start to fail. Nobody sees them and nobody knows about them unless there is a sewer main that's leaking or a stormwater management failure, those kinds of things. So in the cost right now is a fairly robust replacement of much of those facilities. When our civil engineers walk the sites with your facility staff, they made repeated comments about the concerns about those things you can't see underground. Now, again, there's an opportunity to put those costs off to a later point, but that's what this project includes. The other thing is that, okay, for we're not looking at the middle schools for right now, but we're looking at 2 of the elementaries. And remember, there was this question about what about the K-8 restructure? Well, for right now, the staff is recommending that the restructuring not be done, but it's more of a priority to make improvements at these facilities and to keep them now at the K-5, but also to think about leaving the ability to change later if needed to the restructured K-8. So, for example, Woodberry right now is looked at as a K-5, but could it reasonably readily become a K-3 later on? And the answer is yes. And the impact of that is not tremendous. And then Johnson's a similar situation. You know, right now we've looked at it being K-5, but what if it were to become the 7-8 in the restructured plan? And one of the things you'll see is one of the things that makes that work is having an adequate gym for Johnson, more than just an elementary school playroom-sized gym. So you'll see that. So while we could get into much more detail about that, we tried to keep that in mind, that these design concepts still allow that plan to occur if you decide to go that direction. Now, as I've mentioned to you several times, okay, this is the basis of the study, and we could essentially look at cost reductions. And so the process, the way we will develop our tools, the way we will develop our costs, especially if you confirm or maybe redirect us, over time we'll have the ability to almost itemize and go back and look at all these options more carefully if it's necessary to really reduce the cost. So that process is built into what we're doing. Okay, try to keep us moving. This is Johnson. And so existing site plan, grab my laser. So obviously this is the front of the school here. There's the Northside preschool. Some of the things that really stand out about Johnson from a site perspective is that really the mess is kind of back behind here, where a vastly undersized kitchen and the dumpsters and the heating and cooling units and everything are just right next to the entrance to the preschool. Yep. And we have more parking needs and we have bus needs that all need to be addressed. So we're going to show you how we deal with that. This is actually now a three-dimensional view of that, and what you're actually seeing there is we have built a computer model of the school. That's going to really serve us well as we go forward and do the designs. But there's that back end that is really a problem at this school. So this is the new design concept. And what we're doing here is we're taking the reality that the existing kitchen is way too small and it's in the wrong place in the building, and you can't take this existing kitchen and build a new kitchen in the same place and still occupy the school. So this happens all the time in school renovation. So the way you solve that problem is you actually build a new kitchen while the old one continues to operate. And then you convert the use of that existing kitchen. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this school and flip it so that now we're going to access the school mainly from the public from this street. And so what happens here, here's the main components. This is the new parking area for Johnson, and this is where the parents come in and drop off and go out. This is the new administrative area. This is the new kitchen. Now the kitchen is served off of what is now the new bus loop. So the bus traffic is completely separate from the other traffic, and the service for that kitchen is off the bus loop. Now think about that. This is a very common practice in schools. Buses are controlled time. It's just in the morning and the afternoon, so now that service does not conflict with the other vehicular traffic. Furthermore, what we've done is we've located the new gymnasium, which is properly sized, it's a full-size gym with limited spectator seating, which would serve not only this community with a new gym, but also allow for the future middle school program. It's located here. And then what we do is we take the, I'm getting into too much of your detail, Nick. He's going to go over the floor plans. But what we're going to do is we're going to convert the existing playroom into the new cafeteria. So, and then what happens is now we have cleaned up all this service activity, gotten it out of there. We have the opportunity to now put a small administrative presence for Northside, and they have their own clean entrance to that side of the site. And we're really not touching the rest of Northside. And we've already discussed with the food service director the issues of having the kitchen that far away from Northside. We got a little support kitchen there on that side. But that's the overall concept. And it's, in our opinion now, what we're able to do is accomplish most of the kind of standard planning principles that you want to have in an elementary school. And Nick, I am going to click the next slide. And this is just going to show, this just shows the massing of what we're doing. So you can see this is from the back. This is the gym. This is a two-story addition with the admin and some classrooms above. And there's a very small addition to help provide a new entrance. All we're showing is just a block of that right now. We haven't, it doesn't make sense to fully develop the design character until you are in agreement with the overall approach. And now we're going to go to, that just shows it from front, from now what used to be the front, now it's the back, as it were. And Nick, I'll let you hit the full things.
All right. So as Ben was saying, the existing kitchen was right in this area. It's very small. So we moved it back over here. We allow for a small, reduced size kind of warming kitchen that can serve the kitchen for Northside here. What we have is all of the grade groups. You get kindergarten in here. You repurpose the dining room for a couple of kindergarten classrooms. You have the first grade back here. You get the second grade here, fourth and fifth. New admin and entrance here that comes right into a lobby area that you can access the dining room, which was the gym and stage, the kitchen, the gym off of that, a stair and elevator that then takes you up into the second floor where your new media center is that overlooks kind of the parking area there. You get your art room, computer lab, and then finally the third grade classrooms would be up on the second level. And there would be a new connecting corridor wrapping back into here that gets handicap access from this elevator to that third grade level.
And one of the cool things there is you get most of those after-hours community use functions on one side of the site. They have access to parking, and it's easy to cordon it off from the rest of the building for after-hours use. So that's what we mean when we say a lot of the planning principles that we would look for in elementary school are achieved here. Bottom line is your continued investment in that property is a good investment in our view. All right, so we're going to hit Woodberry Hills. There's the existing plan. There's a lot of good things to work with here. Probably just a few things that stand out to us are we need to improve the site circulation and so forth. We certainly need to expand it, but we also have a really kind of probably an unacceptable situation with that tiny little playroom that's in there. It's not only too small, but the ceiling structure is awfully low. So we're going to talk about what we do with that. There is now the existing plan, but we've laid the computer model on top of it, of the existing building. And then here is the new concept. Essentially, we're not having to flip this school. Here we were just improving the parking, so now you come in and the buses kind of come to the back and they have this entire back corner for all the buses, then all the parking is here, and then the parent drop-off swings around. Now they don't have completely separate entrances, but on the site they do, within the site they do operate separately. So that's good. The blue areas are generally the classroom areas, and what you're seeing essentially is a two-story classroom addition back here, a small admin addition up front, an expansion of the library, and then a new gym on the back. But this is not a full-size gym. This is more like a one way to think of it is like a volleyball court size. That's kind of what we used as a guideline. At least you could use it for the height for volleyball and some limited spectator, but not a full-size basketball court. Again, these are the assumptions, and all of these can change. This just shows it diagrammatically, so the brighter orange is showing you where the new additions are. There's the library expansion, the admin expansion, I need to go back to this, the two-story addition to get the classrooms that are needed, and then there's the small gym or playroom addition there. That's just a view of it from the back. Again, a lot of the planning principles that we'd like to achieve are happening here. Nick, your turn.
Yeah. So this one, we expanded the admin here and created a new entry vestibule, secure. We have the media center directly off of that right here, and we come out to the front of the building with and do a new open reading room there. Dining and kitchen largely remain the same. Some resource rooms that are, again, this is all the same, really reusing the structure of the existing classrooms here. And what the main addition back here of classrooms comes in off of this level, and then you enter into an elevator and stair here that allows you to provide handicap access down to this level, which is about a half a story down. So you have a split stair, one goes up, one goes down, and an elevator front back gives you access to all of that there. The new gym back here, so repurposing the existing gym for music and art. That space, while isn't great size for a playroom right now, it would allow for both a new music and art room, adding some windows, some light to that area, but repurposing that. And then here's the second floor. You can see, again, just stacking the classrooms right on top of each other, the elevator and stair down on this end, and some resource spaces with that.
Langston. Nice campus, lots of nice facilities here, lots of nice renovation of the window systems and so forth in recent history. There's the computer model that we've built. And so I think most of you are certainly familiar with the campus. What we're looking at here is essentially repurposing the existing spaces, and many of them in their current configuration, with not having to do major renovations and relocations of walls. What we're not doing is we're not using the building in the back here. It's currently unassigned because it's not needed in the program. So there's some time to think about how that might be repurposed. But one of the things we are thinking about, Nick's going to go through the floor plan, but from a site planning standpoint, one of the things that's going to be key is how do you think about the security of the campus? Similar situation to GW. Whenever you have a campus type approach where you have disjointed or disconnected buildings, how do you do that? And so one of the main areas of additions that we're looking at is really actually addressing a secure perimeter and the connections. So, for example, right now you've got a fair number of existing canopies that connect these buildings, but they're in very poor condition. They really just need, they're given their age and the type of construction that were done, they don't really serve the quality of the overall campus well. They need to be demolished. So what we're doing is we're looking at doing new connecting canopies that are architectural in nature to really respect the quality of the architecture that's there, and also to provide good connections. So for example, we don't really feel like you need a connecting canopy between these two buildings, but instead bring an architectural canopy out front, and we're going to show you some more detailed models of that in a moment, that not only provides a secure perimeter, but gives you that weather-protected access. Not fully enclosed condition, but because that's awfully expensive, but at least rain protection. Do the same thing from this building back to the auditorium and dining area and so forth. And then what you've done, and then also from this building, you've really created a network of connectivity there. This starts to show it from a different angle. And one of the things this slide starts to reveal is the idea of doing something that creates a clear sense of gateway into the campus. Right now, when you drive up, you wonder, kind of, where do you go? And so, for a limited cost overall, it's the idea of doing something, this is just an architectural idea, that really accents the entrance. And you can see then the architectural development of that canopy. So this is from the parking lot, looking at, there's the existing buildings in the background, but there is some kind of gateway entrance feature that's not only practical in terms of you can drive up to it, be undercover right away and get into the facility, but something that says this is the main entrance. And now, this is just an initial idea. Galileo program, something that feels modern, something akin to flight in terms of the architecture. We could obviously look at many ideas there, but this is something that could really respect the original architecture and give a special quality, though, and a civic, perhaps a more civic presence to the building. We titled it Langston. Obviously, we don't know what the title of the facility might be, but that just kind of shows you that idea. Again, practical and also, hopefully, at some level, inspirational to that campus. That just kind of shows you, I mean, that kind of development, that's that front canopy, that has a major impact on the quality and the feel of that main campus green there. It's providing the security, but also changing the feel, or maybe increasing the quality of the feel. So because there was that was part of the big idea, we took a little time to develop that more completely in terms of some ideas. Nick, floor plan.
So not much for additions here. Gym, this building's largely remaining the same, capturing the health classroom there, the locker rooms and the gym remain the same. Obviously the locker rooms will be refurbished. Auditorium, again, largely remains the same. In this area, we provide a museum, a historical museum for the school. Will remain there. Workrooms, art, the admin area right here at the front. This is where that new entry feature would be right in this area. So you come and you're right into the admin. From there, you go back into here, repurposing this, which originally was, I believe, some sort of like CTE type classrooms, but this would be kind of like your tech lab and seminar space. And then student commons, so this would have a little bit, we would do something that has a little bit different feel than your typical cafeteria. It would be more like a cafe style area, although still accessed off the kitchen. The classroom wings are largely they would still remain classroom wings. The walls that divide it don't really work for the program as they are now, that divide each one of these classrooms. So we would have to rework all of those. But the corridor would remain the same here. The large room on the end here obviously would remain the same. What you're seeing here is you have these classrooms, and then you have kind of these small breakout rooms within them. Again, it's a couple of science classrooms, small breakout room. And then what we're showing here is to solve the accessibility issues with this building, Building F, which is about a half a story below Building D, is one of those front-back elevators, a stair, and a corridor connection over to both floors of this building. So you can come in and somebody can get to both floors of D and both floors of F from here. And then the classrooms, again, would be in this area. This is the second floor. Above the admin area would be the guidance and the new media center. And the connection over these floor plates are the same as below.
And then finally, GW. There's an aerial view of GW. There's a lot on that campus. There's the model we have built. Looking at it from that angle, this is currently the main entrance right there. In terms of a point of reference, there's the CTE building in the back, and the gym and so forth back over there, just to give you some orientation. But this is the plan here. Let's see. Nick, was that the next one to zoom in?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so. Okay. Zooming in just a little bit. But what is the big idea here? The big idea for this plan is, I mean, much of the existing building is reused in its current shape. But let's actually start with this back end. Right now, this shows adding a new gym, and a high school of this size and with the stature of its athletic facilities traditionally would warrant a second gym. And right now, there has been discussion about having the ability to have regional competition. So for example, and again, you can always adjust, this is sized to have 2,500 seats. That allows you even to have double-header competition at the 4A level. And so the best place for this gym is down at this end because of all the locker facilities and weight rooms and everything that are already there. So that's one of the things we're doing. One of the things you're going to see in the plan, though, is this idea of creating, right here is what we're calling a great hall. It is a space that's going to allow us to connect the new gym with not only the existing gym, but the rest of the school. And because you need to invest in some kind of circulation and closed corridor to get there, this actually creates an opportunity to create a space that can have multiple functions. So we'll call it a great hall, where it can now become things like senior dining area, breakout space for your intermissions and other facilities for your after-hours events. And one of the things that this school really needs, and you find in a modern high school, is just special student space, commons area that's other than just corridors and classrooms. And so this is one of the big ideas there. What we're also doing in this plan is that we're reconfiguring the parking lot so that this now could serve as a major drop-off area. The parking is redirected so that it's easy to access that major after-hour and during school activity. And what we're also doing is solving some pretty difficult service access to the building. The existing kitchen is big enough and so forth, it needs some renovation, but service vehicles trying to maneuver and get there really have a difficult time. So we're solving that problem as well. So that's one of the big ideas, is the new gym and the new student space that's created on that end. The other thing is how to address the courtyard. And what we're suggesting there is, similar to Langston, those existing canopies that connect all those buildings, they're needed, but they're in very poor condition. And the way they're built, they really, in our opinion, are not worthy of refurbishing. But also, we don't think they're in the best location. What we're going to suggest is we're going to actually reduce them and push them up against the CTE building. So what that does is that gets this opportunity to improve the architecture of that building and the feel of that campus green, yet still provide the functional connection. It's a little hard to read at this size and this far away, but the red areas are going to indicate where there's new additions. So where they're circled, there's the gym, there's a new building trades addition for CTE, and then on this end is the idea of expanding outside the library some of that other special space that's needed in most high schools, project-based learning, collaboration, 21st century type space, higher bay, more light, more openness, put that right outside the library there. So now, as far as the other site issues, we've already mentioned the need for a lot of site infrastructure, and there's a lot here to address. And then there's also the issue of the stadium. Right now, in the scope of the work, we have included essentially removing the track and making this a soccer football complex and not using and trying to use it as track. When you see when we get to the end, one of the things we did not mention in Langston, the staff asked us to consider, could the Langston site actually serve as the new track competition facility? And the answer is yes. The geometry is there, the layout is there, and you could even consider it being a place for regional competition. So that really changes the potential of the quality of the venue by not trying to make it serve so many functions. There's also some dimensional problems of trying to use that as a new 8-lane competition track with your existing stadium facilities. There's probably a lot more discussion that is needed there. What we've also not included yet, because of the need for more discussion, is actually any renovations to the concessions and field house and things of that nature. So that, again, that's an area where we realize a lot of discussion will be needed. If we look at, this just kind of shows now from the computer model view, again, the front of the school is right here. There's the idea of the addition for the breakout spaces, 21st century learning, project-based learning space. You know, it's a great location there because there's kind of a natural bowl. It's a low part of the site. So we have the opportunity to produce higher spaces there and still allow the library to kind of view through that space out to the front. It also gives you the opportunity to do some architectural improvements that it can be viewed from the highway, I mean, in terms of its visibility. This is a logical location for the building trades expansion, which actually connects those buildings. And then we've already explained the rationale for the gym down at that end of the property. And this just shows the view from the other end. By the way, and this hasn't been fully developed, but in the site development costs, we've also included things like resurfacing the parking lots and addressing that driveway that gets all the way down to the stadium instead of just the gravel drive. Again, things that could always be removed, but they're included for now. And then there's just a different view of, this would be that major Great Hall through there. Oh, one of the things too that could be an idea in terms of the Great Hall idea of not only those functions we mentioned, but also it might be a great place to do a sports hall of fame with the way things are displayed and so forth, with the athletic heritage that's here in Danville. That's just a view from the back. Floor plan thing.
Zoom in a moment on some of these areas, but to hit the high notes again, this entrance here, reworking the admin so that you now come into what was the original entrance and into a secure vestibule here, and forces you directly into the admin before you can enter into the school. Students could still enter in through the bus this way here. This kind of auditorium and fine arts areas would largely remain the same. Reworking the little theater into a black box theater now. Special ed wing, media center here, the cafeteria and kitchen down in this area, the gym there. And what we're showing here is new enclosed corridors that connect directly across this area. So if somebody's over here and needs to get to the cafeteria, they don't have to go outside, or they don't have to go all the way around beyond the media center and then back down to the cafeteria. So zooming in a little bit here, this is the Great Hall area. Again, the student commons and kitchen. This could serve as senior dining. The program does call for a little bit of extra dining room, so our thought is to recapture this space. It's adjacent to the existing dining room. Reusing these locker rooms to serve both gyms. They're plenty big enough, especially considering, once they get reworked, some of the showers that aren't used nowadays could be captured for additional locker spaces. Turning this back into an auxiliary gym, health classrooms, reusing a lot of the existing classroom spaces. Science wing largely remains the same. This is the media center. It would have the opportunity to look down into that new 21st learning space, 21st century learning space. This is where most of your special ed areas would be. English wing. This is just showing the basement below the existing gym. The locker room and storage and things down there would largely remain the same. This is the basement, but below the library, the basement level. So this is where that new 21st century learning space is. You have a large collaboration area, a couple of large kind of lab type spaces, offices and breakout spaces for that, and then the rest of it would be storage. This shows a new stair coming in that would allow you to access the media center directly, but they're leaving the elevator and the stair now as an accessible way to get to this area from that space. And then this shows the second floor of the main building, and what we had shown was this being dedicated to 9th grade. So all of your 9th grade classes, core classes would be here, English, math, science. And so they would have their own separate space that they wouldn't need to get in. You know, they could be separated for most of the day from the rest of the school. And then this being the foreign language wing.
Yeah, would you hit the issue about the breakout spaces along the corridor? One of the things that's nice about GW is they have very wide corridors. One of the things that's not so nice is that they're forever long. You know, when you walk in the current front door, and so Nick's going to address some ideas related to that.
Yeah, so this, what you're seeing right here is we've opened up kind of these spaces along the stairwells here and here to allow you to kind of pull out, you know, if a class wants to pull out into a small group and go into here and here during class time, but also allows students in between classes a place to gather and, you know, charge their cell phones, do whatever, have some high top seating, some different types of seating, some lounge seating, but also looks directly out into these new reworked courtyards.
And brings in natural light too.
You can see here, so these courtyards, right, brings in natural light to the corridor, or to the corridors. That's a good point. All right. So now we're going to take a look at the CTE buildings here. So this is the entry level of the CTE building, the admin that's there. These are kind of the more clean type CTE spaces, family consumer sciences, and the clean labs, dental and nursing. This is the new addition that then allows you to connect these two buildings. So you can walk along the front and then over into what's called the Tech Studies building. And these are the new building trades CTE spaces, large bay. They have access off of that service area off the back. We have some of the art spaces and orchestra moved here close. If you remember, that's very close to the fine arts of the other buildings, directly across the canopy. And then the JROTC program to move back into here. In talking with the staff here, they thought this was a good idea because this already has a wood floor and would be a great space for them. Going to the second floor, again, the clean spaces are along the front, provide kind of that common project area here that, you know, robotics and criminal justice could come together and do a project together in this area. Again, opening it up to the corridor. This is the existing precision machining area and the existing auto body bays.
We're getting near the end. So we've already mentioned that some of the discussion points that really need to be done is the extent of the athletic complex development. You know, right now the field house not included. This is for the high school. Concessions not. You know, are we using the right capacities for the seating? That'll be a discussion because that directly affects the size of any potential for a new gym. Nick mentioned that we're repurposing the locker rooms. Don't think you need additional locker rooms, but you may disagree. And in terms of that idea, the competition track at Langston, order of magnitude, probably around $3.5 million that we would add to the 119 to accomplish that. Now, remember this chart at the very beginning. So what this assumed was a bidding, this was based on pricing of about a year from now in terms of bidding the projects. We know that that's probably unrealistic, but you have to start somewhere in terms of the pricing. So what if the bidding year were to just move out? And so what this does, there's the $119 million that you've already seen based on the bidding year of 2019. This just simply shows an annual escalation of 3% that's compounded every year. You could argue, should it be 3.5%? Should it be a little less than 3? It's a fairly mid-level. None of us can predict it for sure. But overall, I mean, for many years, from about 2008 till around 2016, we had very flat inflation. In the construction industry, we're starting to see that really pick up. But you can see, as you wait, you just multiply it by 1.03. If you get out as far as 2023 before you bid, which would be 5 years from now, or 4 years from now, you just start this process, you can see that ends up being $134 million. Well, that difference represents the Woodberry Hills project. That's a way to put it in perspective of the cost of when you're in an inflationary market. We recently were proposing and discussing a school with Franklin County, a major CTE addition that we started discussing 5 years ago when the project was around 40 million or around 50 million, and now we're talking 70 million for a similar kind of work. It's just the reality of what can happen. So if as the city considers any of this, what I think your financial folks would tell you is that yes, escalation in construction has started to really pick up. But financing costs, and this is not our area of expertise, but financing costs are still very attractive. So those are things you really should be thinking about as you consider how you might move forward. We're glad to answer any questions. Dr. Osborne, how do we do on time? Probably not very well.
Just a little over what we had projected, but I think you covered a lot of information. So.
Are there any questions from any board members? Yes, Mr. Gould.
Can you go back to the numbers slide? For lack of a better way to put it.
Yeah, can y'all see which one is previous?
Up at the top.
Second.
We see that. Okay. Oh, there you go.
This one
Or actually, sorry, the itemized by school.
Yeah.
One before, maybe. This question is I don't know that it's not specific to George Washington High School, but those are the numbers that make me ask this question, just based on the total ticket amount there. Is there a rule of thumb that you recommend for ceasing investing in a current plant and starting over? Mm-hmm. Just from a business perspective, putting $66 million into a 62-year-old structure begs the question, if we created what would the price tag be
for a new school
to replace that with a new school with the amenities that you mentioned? How far above 66 million would we be talking?
Yeah. So the answer is a really good question. In fact, if you look, so the threshold number that we recommend that you really start seriously having the conversation is what we call 75%. So if the cost of renovating and expanding approaches 75% of what it would take to build new, you really should be asking yourself the question, gosh, should we really just build new? And the Department of Education doesn't agree with that. They actually say 50%, but 50% to our view is just way too low of a threshold. I mean, that's a lot of money leaving on the table. So if you were to look at this one, and we would look at it more closely, there's still, in GW, for example, there's a lot of scope that we still haven't resolved. But you're still below the 75% here. So really what happens is the question becomes, I mean, you can look at that, what do you get in the end? It's not just the issue of what the cost is, but what are the results? And so you should feel confident that if it's 75, or even if it's more than 75%, that you're really happy with the end result for many years to come. And some of those issues, by the way, are not just monetary. Some of those might be community sentiment or historical value. And I'm not even making a judgment on those things. They all weigh into the equation. Some of these schools are kind of on the threshold.
And I guess, this is just me personally, going forward for any conversations like this, I would be very interested to know for any school that we're looking at, and not holding you to it, but just wondering, what would the replacement cost be?
Right.
So that we can do that side by side, just to know.
Yeah, it's not very difficult to do a fairly high altitude analysis that does give you a lot of information.
Dr. Campbell.
Out of the 4 schools, if you would categorize it, which one would be first that would need more attention, number 2, 3, 4?
You know, I really would defer to the staff in terms of the priority, in terms of, from a condition standpoint, I don't know that I necessarily put one higher above the other. I mean, Johnson's got that really difficult kitchen and that issue there. But I think a lot of the questions would be related to programming and school performance and other issues that would weigh in there. Because the heating and cooling system renovations were all done in a similar time frame.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
kind of to piggyback on Mr. Gould's question, with the consideration of the type of money that you're spending for these renovations and the age of these schools you've got from 1955 to 2017 with that type of investment, how far in the future could you look at to be from a programmatic standpoint? That $66 million get us, but we'd be looking at another 60 years before we'd have to look at, and I know that's not a fair question, but that kind of money, how far in the future could we go?
Yeah, it would depend mainly, I mean, you're still going to have the same need to replace heating and cooling systems every generation, essentially, 20 to 25 years. It really depends on how much education would change. You know, the typical classroom, squares classroom and double-loaded corridors has served for a really long time. And we're still doing some of that, but we're also providing some flexible space and some open spaces in these that should help programmatically the schools to endure.
Because, I mean, you're looking at $119 million, it'd take, what, 30 years to pay that off?
It depends on the
It
financing
depends on the
strategy.
financing, but
Yeah.
I'm saying,
Mhm.
you know, 30 years down the road, are we looking at spending another? Yeah, you have to really.
That's why we're glad that city council members are here tonight.
Amen.
Yeah, I think the simple answer to your question is not that order of magnitude. I think you have some pent-up demand here.
Because I'm kind of with Mr. Gould, you know, you look at the cost to renovate, sometimes it is cheaper to be, I know you talked about a threshold and where that's set, but at some point you need to make a decision whether you hit that threshold or not. Would we be better off to build new?
Yeah, from a standpoint of, is it going to be cheaper to build new? No, it's not. And that's why I take you back to the question of, are you really satisfied with the results that are presented here? And then the other thing is that's clearly an advantage to a renovation scenario as opposed to new. When you do new, you've got to do it all, right? You have at least the opportunity to decide how you might scale back and what you might live with and what you might do later that you don't have with a new project.
Mr. Gould?
Are there efficiencies and kind of continuing along with the conversation of thinking about replacing structures, having replacement buildings, recognizing how the building of schools has changed over the last 65 years.
Mhm.
Are there, and again, not to, I understand that a replacement is not going to be cheaper than any of these things, but in your experience, are there savings and efficiencies that can be realized in opting for replacements, given changes in how schools are constructed and laid out now? I don't think anybody would say that the way that the George Washington High School campus is laid out is efficient. It sprawls, and a lot of these schools sprawl on their campuses. Are there efficiencies and savings that other localities have realized, just in terms of, I guess the way to say it is, it's not like we would rebuild in the exact footprint with the exact same structure. I would assume there would be some savings and efficiencies from just a more modern layout and structure. Is that what you all have seen in your experience?
Yeah, I think it's an especially fair question related to GW. If you look at Johnson and Woodberry, they are still going to end up being fully connected, fairly compact, fairly efficient buildings, and decent planning diagrams. GW, by its very nature of any campus, any high school that was built like that, it was built with multiple buildings just spread out. Just literally the cost of creating the connections, the cost of additional building on below, the infrastructure to connect all the buildings with heating and cooling and power and sidewalks and all of that. So no question of what would typically happen in a modern high school is it's going to be a fully connected building, very efficiently designed. So that argument is worth a careful look. Now Langston has a similar situation, but then you probably have the historical factor there. You know, you're not fully utilizing Langston for the Galileo, but you've also got the opportunity to use the unassigned space for some other function.
Anyone else? Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You all have a good evening. Good holiday. I don't think you want to talk to me between now and holidays.
And next, we have first reading of policy revisions from section 1000 by none other than our own Mr. Stephen Gould and Dr. Edward Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the truly riveting portion of our agenda for the evening. That was a joke.
We're already riveted.
Pick up on that. We've begun our work, our two-man committee, working through Section 1000, and as Ms. Hughes mentioned, this is going to be the first reading tonight, and Dr. Paul Hamas and I are going to run through the changes in fairly quick order. I think what you will see, just for some introductory comments, a lot of these changes are largely of a housekeeping nature and serve to clarify some ambiguities that we thought existed. So there are not a lot of truly substantive revisions. There are some, but I think we can go through these fairly quickly. Starting with regulation number 1010.05, two types of changes in this. There's a replacement of the superintendent or designee with FOIA officer. And then we have updated the language regarding charges for meeting Freedom of Information Act requests to make sure that those are consistent with what the city is charging. In policy number, and sorry, that was, title of that policy is just request for information, and that is the accompanying regulation. Policy number 1020.00, title of which is Community Involvement in Decision-Making, features two types of changes. One is some better language to indicate exactly what is occurring here, which is that we're making sure that we provide members of the public with an opportunity to share input, and we have renamed one entity, the Community Input Forum is now the Superintendent's Community Engagement Forum, and we have added the Piedmont Governor's School Board and the Gifted Advisory Board as opportunities for members of the public to provide feedback. Next is Regulation 1020.10, titled School Community Involvement. Again, we have some nomenclature changes with respect to the superintendent's engagement form, and actually on 1020.10, that should be Superintendent's Community Engagement Forum rather than Superintendent's Engagement Forum. And then some updated language with respect to PTAs and PTOs in the community. Going from more specific to more general description regarding the role of those organizations. And we've also added some legal references there. Not in this stack of policies, but coming soon is policy number 1030.00, I believe, regarding certain activity and distribution of materials within schools. We're working with Mr. Spencer and Dr. Jones to iron out some of the stickier language there and making sure that it passes legal muster. The heaviest lift that we have done is with policy number 1030.20, administration of surveys and questionnaires, where we added the letter S to a word. 1035.00, the non-locally funded programs policy. It deals with the process by which outside funding is sought to benefit the school division, with added language that provides clarity about when this board will be bound by certain requests, providing additional clarity with respect to procedures to be followed when such grants are sought. Policy number 1040.00 regarding school facility use. There are a couple different types of changes here. The housekeeping ones are some basic language changes, updating of titles, but on the closer to the end, under the schedule of charges for rental of school property, you'll see a fairly wholesale updating of the charges for our facilities to be used. This is the first time that the schedule of fees has been updated since policy was first, this portion of the policy, I believe, was first adopted in 2005. So it's an appropriate time to make those changes, and again, this is based on Dr. Osborne and her staff taking a close look at what our costs are when these spaces are used. We want to make sure they're available to the community, but also want to make sure that the costs associated with such use are being met. In the accompanying regulation for that policy, R 1040.00, we have an updating of titles or names, changing the Office of Administrative Services to the Office of Operations, and making the change from Assistant Superintendent for Administrative Services to the Chief Operations Officer. Policy 1040.10, title of which is Equal Access for Student Groups, includes a couple of small changes. One deals with how non-curriculum related clubs in schools go about being approved to operate, and we make it clear that a building administrator has to approve such clubs, but that such approval shall not be, and here's actually another change, should not be unreasonably withheld. It currently says that it shall not be reasonably withheld, which is clearly an error. And we provide that if a student group makes a request that is not approved by a building administrator, that may be appealed to the superintendent. Policy number 1040.20, titled Physical Access for School-Related Meetings, includes just some clarifying language regarding access to those buildings for those who are disabled. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Paul Hammonds to bring us home.
Thank you, Mr. Gould. Moving right along to policy 1050. The biggest change here is for any sale to be approved, it must benefit the division. And that is a much broader set of words than the current language that said it must bring direct benefit to the educational program. We believe, given the kinds of fundraising done, particularly at the high school level, this will be a very helpful change. Then on policy 1060, public conduct on school property. If you look at this online later, you'll see it looks like the entire second paragraph is brand new. In fact, it's simply a relocation of the old fifth or sixth paragraph to provide a little more emphasis about the role of the principals in controlling the conduct of the public while on our property. And a couple of other details were added in here in consultation with Mr. Spencer to make sure that we are fully in agreement with current state law. Then 1070 on public gifts to the schools. The biggest change here is to involve consultation with the school board chair by the superintendent or designee for any non-consumable gift valued under $5,000, simply to make sure that the board is aware of the kinds of things that might be coming in case someone asks us on the street, oh, I hear you got a new copier, or somebody gave you a copier or a piano or whatever. So it helps for us to be aware of those things. Then policy 1090, the difference between will and may not advertise. We're going with may not advertise. We think that somehow carries a little more force to it. And instead of talking about employed in any manner in the general sense of employing something, we just change it to even more generic, used in any manner. Then in policy 1100.50 on service animals in public schools, much of this is added wording that comes from the changes at the state level. Mr. Spencer and our internal staff helped us get all the latest regulations so that we are in full compliance with what the state expects regarding service animals on school property. Then policy 1110 on public complaints. We broaden it a little bit there in the first paragraph to where the superintendent does not necessarily have to hear every complaint, that the superintendent may designate a central office administrator to review a complaint, and then a corresponding change in the next sentence to follow through on the chain of command for subsequent action. Then the regulation that goes with that, we've added the central office administrator based on the policy change that we're recommending. And we also put capital T and capital P on the first two categories for simple consistency. Then there is a new note at the bottom of that regulation that points out that learning materials complaints are addressed in a totally separate policy because of the sensitive nature of that kind of an issue, as I believe all our administrators are well aware. Then relations with police authority, policy number 1120.20. Mr. Spencer again came to our aid and made sure that we had all the correct legal references in the Commonwealth, and we added that sentence that cross-references a subsequent policy, which in fact is the next policy on our list. And that policy is the sex offender registry notification. The huge change that we have made here is to point out that the availability of that information is out on the web, and the current policy says the location of the internet website shall be provided to parents. Knowing that the web is bigger than just the internet, we have dropped the word internet from that policy. Hope y'all appreciate that change. Then in 1170, we again broadened the language due to changes in the structure of our PTAs. And this policy does have to do with relations with parent and booster organizations. But the basic expectations remain unchanged. Then policy 1180, Dr. Andrews and her staff did a superb job of going through this in great detail, because much of this is fully laid out for us by the federal government, and we certainly want our policies to be in line with the federal government. And I believe, unless I have missed something, that concludes our initial first reading of policy changes in section 1000. We are still working on policy 1030. We'll get that to you as soon as we can. And there, I believe, is scheduled a public hearing on these potential policy changes at our next meeting coming up in 2 weeks. We encourage the public to take a look at these policies out there on our internet site, and let us know if you see anything that needs further correction. Mr. Jones, did we do that a little quicker than we used to?
Ms. Jones?
Yes. Going to policy 1120.20.
1120.20, okay.
If you go down to, and you all didn't make any changes, I just have a question.
Okay.
Under reporting to law enforcement officials,
Uh-huh.
there's a number 2, but there's nothing there.
Oh. Does it occur on the next page by any chance?
Number 3 occurs on the next page.
Oh. Well, we will have to go back and look and see what might have happened. This may simply be the result of switching formats for these policies. Unfortunately, board docs is not quite as flexible with making these kinds of changes, and so I will get with, I think Wendy probably put these in, and we'll make sure that they're either renumbered or that the real number 2 will come to the full board immediately after we find it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Is there any other discussion about the section? Thank you very much. Next, we're on to personnel recommendations. Dr. Jennings?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, everyone. The Department of Human Resources has prepared for you 8 personnel recommendations. Earlier in the week, we put on board docs the first page that covered numbers 01 through 06, and then yesterday morning we added 2 more on the addendum because those arrived late Tuesday afternoon. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to look at those, and we respectfully request your approval of these recommendations.
Are there any questions for Dr. Jennings?
Yes. I just want to be clear on case 06.
Yes.
And what was in our folders, this person wants to volunteer, is that?
Yes.
Okay.
If his time allows.
Okay.
He had a change in what he's doing.
Yes, Dr. Williams.
I have
A couple of questions. First, in cases 01 and 02, both of these are requests for retirement mid-year. And it has been something this board has been working on to try to really stress to our teachers that that contract they sign around July 1st is for the whole year. Do you have any further information that would help clarify why we need to?
I do. I'm familiar with both of these cases and these individuals, and I will tell you that medical reasons are at play here. Neither wants to go. Neither wants to go, but for personal reasons of that nature, they must. They're not able to continue.
Are there any other questions for Dr. Jennings? This is an action item.
Madam Chair, I move we approve.
Second.
It's been moved by Dr. Campbell, seconded by Mr. Jones, that we accept the personnel recommendations as presented. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Dr. Paul Amos?
Yes.
Dr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Hubbard?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Gould?
Yes.
Mrs. Hall? Ms. Hughes?
Yes. Thank you. Yay. Next we have the 2018-19 Budget Development Schedule presented by Ms. Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. Good evening. At the board's work session on November 13th, you were presented the draft of the 2018-19 Budget Development Schedule, and we bring you that schedule back tonight requesting action to approve it. There was only one change made in the interim. We corrected the date of the second February board meeting to February 15th. We had incorrectly listed it as February 22nd in the first draft. So if there are no questions or additions or revisions, we respectfully request your approval.
Any questions, yes, Mr. Gould?
One question, thank you, Madam Chair. And Ms. Cass, this may be a joint question for you and Dr. Jones. Given that the preliminary appropriation request is due to the city by the end of calendar year, and the results of the salary study do not come back until mid-February, do you anticipate there being a, for lack of a better way to put it, placeholder figure in our budget request to the city, anticipating that there will be at least some movement that we will want to request based on the results of the salary study? Or are we going to, do you feel like because of the timing, we're going to need to wait a year to get that in the queue?
We're going to have to wait.
Wait a year to ask for, presuming the salary study says that we need to do more, will it need to wait until the next budget cycle for that to be built in?
I would hate to see that happen. Just the further you push it out, the less reliable. I feel like that the salary schedule, that the Evergreen consultants are going to give us a phasing in type of recommendation anyway. So I would put you for either placeholder. We'll be talking to them in the next 2 weeks what they think that might be a projected cost based on what they're doing right now, especially maybe even just for one classification of employees. It may not be that we'll be able to do every classification of employees this first year. That would probably be unrealistic. A lot of work's got to happen in the next two weeks once we see the governor's budget next week to even see what our revenue picture is going to look like. Then we'll be meeting with staff and trying to come up with a preliminary number to give the city some idea of what our needs are by the date they've asked for it.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Cassidy? This is an action item.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the 2018-19 budget development schedule.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Gould, seconded by Mr. Hubbard, that we approve the budget development schedule for 2018-19. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Hubbard?
Yes.
Dr. Paul Amos?
Yes.
Dr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Gold?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Hughes?
Yes. Next, we have action items from instruction. The 2017-2018 Title IV Part A Student Support and Academic Enrichment Grant Application. Ms. Green?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the school board. Today I come before you to request approval of the 2017-18 Title IV Part A Student Support and Academic Enrichment Grant application for transferability to our Title II Part A grant. As you're aware, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, as amended by the Every Student Succeeds Act of 2015, provides federal program funds to local divisions. Danville Public Schools has been awarded funding through 2 grants, one of which I'm speaking about now, Title IV Part A, Student Support and Academic Enrichment. Title IV is a federal program that provides funds for programs and activities to improve students' academic achievement by increasing the capacity of local school divisions to provide to all students. Under ESSA, school divisions are allowed to transfer these funds to other federal grant programs. The grant's allocation this year is $87,905.18. During the fall of this year, we learned that our final allocation for Title II Part A was decreased by $53,683.86. Transferring the Title IV funds to Title II will compensate for this decrease. Our 3 participating private schools, which include Rivermont, Sacred Heart, and Carlisle, will also receive their allowable share of the increased allocation as well. Any additional funds thereafter will be utilized to support areas which face decreased funding, which may include but are not limited to contracted services for sustainable professional development as identified by our corrective action plans through school improvement, supplemental stipends, mentoring, new teacher academy, and tuition assistance for eligible teachers working toward proper licensure for additional endorsements in critical shortage areas. It is respectfully requested that the school board approves the submission of the Title IV Part A grant application for 2017-18, as well as sign the page of assurances that are included with the application.
Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Green? This is an action item.
Madam Chair, I move we approve.
Second.
It's been moved by Dr. Campbell, second by Ms. Jones, that we approve the 2017-2018 Title IV Part A Student Support and Academic Enrichment Grant application as presented. Please call the roll.
Mr. Gold?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Hubbard?
Yes.
Dr. Paul-Hamus?
Yes.
Dr. Campbell?
Yes.
Ms. Hughes?
Yes. Thank you. Next.
A second grant that we were most recently eligible to receive is Title V Part B, Subpart 2, which is known as the Rural and Low Income School Program Grant. This grant provides funds to rural school divisions serving concentrations of children from low-income families. A grant to an eligible school division is made according to a formula based on the number of students and average daily attendance served by the school division. Funds may be spent in one or more of the activities authorized under Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV, and parental activities. The allocation for this particular grant is $101,923.67. This grant allocation will be used to supplement our Title II Part A grant with the assurance that the funds will align with all requirements of Title II Part A. The funds will support for professional development needs as outlined in our correction plans and needs assessments. More specifically, funds will be used to provide contracted services for targeted and sustainable professional development. Such services will focus on building instructional and leadership capacity for teachers and administrators. At this time, I respectfully request your approval for the submission of Title V Part B, Subpart 2, as well as the page for assurances for this grant as well.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Hubbard, seconded by Dr. Paul Hamus, that we approve the application grant application for 2017-18 Title V, Part B, Subpart 2 application. Thank you. Please call the roll.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. Paul Hamus?
Yes.
Mr. Gould?
Yes.
Dr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Hubbard?
Yes.
Ms. Hughes?
Yes. Thank you.
Mr. Spencer, do you have any comments?
I don't have any comments.
Mr. Gould?
Don't have much. I apologize, I was a little late coming in. I had a work obligation out of town. I want to thank I'm sure I'll be the first of many to do this, but thank our colleagues from up the hill on City Council for joining us tonight. And obviously, we've got some serious discussions, like always, to have going forward, and we just appreciate your partnership in trying to tackle these things and do what's best for the young people in our community. But I've enjoyed my work with Dr. Paul Hamus on the policy committee. And our meetings are actually far more fun than some people might think. But that's all I have.
Mr. Hubbard?
Thank you. Congratulations to the track team and all the hard work you've done. Your commitment and dedication to that. I'd like to echo my colleagues' comments. Thank the City Council for coming down and showing your interest and support in the work that we're trying to do. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Ms. Jones?
I will echo the comments coming from the previous two and add to that. I had the pleasure of attending a ceremony the other night, not in official capacity, but it was an induction of students into the NSBE program. And NSBE stands for National Society for Black Engineers. But the students that are allowed to join are not just African American students, it's students of any nationality. And we had, I know there were at least 5, and is Ms. Green still here? Were all 9 from city school or from our?
There was representation from Fitzwilliam County, I know, and I think
Halifax.
Halifax.
Yeah. But I know out of the 9 that were inducted on Tuesday evening, at least 5 were from our middle schools. It was heartfelt. It was very nice to see the students that are at that grade level that are actually interested in engineering, and to see the number of females that are interested in engineering. So I'd just like to thank, and Ms. Smalls had said she was going to be here at the meeting tonight, but she's not here. Ms. Smalls teaches at Bond, and Ms. Smalls was the guest speaker. But in listening to the things that she had to say, one of the things that stuck out to me was her tenacity in getting a grant through the Chamber of Commerce for this program in our school system. And I just want to thank her publicly for what she has done and the hard work that she's done trying to get this program in our system. Thank you.
Dr. Jones, I jumped over you. I apologize.
No comment, but I will just add to Ms. Jones, I did talk to Ms. Smalls, and it's my understanding they're going to plan another induction ceremony in the spring.
Yeah, she did say like April or May, because they have so many students that wanted to get in.
Dr. Paul Hamus?
Yes, I would like to echo what's already been said, particularly about Galileo cross country. That's just spectacular. And I trust that that will keep up for years to come. My hunch is with those coaches, it probably will. And certainly appreciate members of council taking time out of their busy schedules to be here with us this evening. On a little sadder note, I want to simply point out that one of our board colleagues and one of our central office chief officers have lost their mothers recently, Mrs. Hall and Dr. Andrews, and I know that's a tough time for anybody. And so my sympathies to the 2 of them and their families. Then last week, Actually, on the same day, I had two wonderful opportunities here within Danville Public Schools. It started in the morning at GW for the NJROTC annual inspection. And to see those young cadets marching in the gym and answering questions from the visiting inspecting officer from the Norfolk area, they did us proud. That is a fine organization. And then later in the day, I was pleased to have an invitation to join the new teachers for a new teacher appreciation dinner. Dr. Jennings and her staff did their usual fine job hosting that event, and it was delightful. Thank you very much.
Dr. Campbell?
Basically, everything that I was going to say has already been said, so I would just say in conclusion, happy holidays to everyone, and I hope you will enjoy your family and the reason for the season. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ms. Hughes?
I would like to echo everything that has been said. I too enjoyed the new teacher appreciation dinner. Had a great time getting to know people a little bit better, and I got to exercise some of my expertise as being the cruise director, as in giving information and advice about any types of services or whatever that a certain young lady would need to avail herself of here in Danville. I did want to say that I appreciate all the work that my fellow board members have done, and Dr. Jones with the strategic plan that we put out the framework for, and express our appreciation to those who worked on the 30th and the 1st to try to put some meat on the bones of that process. And please rest assured that I know there was a lady who came to speak to the board about her return on her tax dollars. And I do want to assure everyone in the community that we will get information, we will get input from all the stakeholders. It is not the board's intent to make a document that is unachievable, nor that one that's going to be sitting on a shelf somewhere. It's going to be a living, breathing document, and that everyone should be able to embrace. Thank you for all your work, and happy holidays.
Madam Chair, I move that we recess for 12 minutes.
Second.
It's been moved by Dr. Paul Hamus and seconded by Mr. Gould that we recess for 12 minutes.
Dr. Campbell?
While we recessing, before I give my answer.
We have a closed session.
Yes.
Dr. Paul Hamus?
Yes.
Mr. Gould?
Yes.
Mr. Hubbard?
Yes.
Ms. Duns?
Yes.
Ms. Hughes?
Yes.